Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a topic that's surrounded by a lot of mystery, misconceptions, and strong opinions. Satanism. So, what exactly is Satanism, and why does it seem to have such a powerful, dark reputation? At its core, Satanism isn't one unified belief. Instead, it's a mix of different religious, philosophical, and ideological views connected to the figure of Satan. And yeah, for most of us, Satan brings to mind the devil, that fallen angel from Christian teachings, who's thought of as the leader of demons, tempting humans into sin. But Satanism goes beyond that image. Satanism, as we recognize it today, is a modern phenomenon, with roots going back to the 1966 founding of the Church of Satan by Anton LaVey in the United States. Interestingly, LaVey's Church of Satan wasn't even about worshipping a literal Satan. It was more atheistic, using Satan as a symbol of individualism and rebellion against established religious norms. Historically, though, accusations of devil worship go way back. During the Middle Ages, for example, the Catholic Inquisition accused groups like the Knights Templar and Cathars of engaging in secret satanic rituals. And during the period we know as the witch trials, there was this widespread belief in a satanic conspiracy involving witches, which led to the tragic execution of thousands, primarily across Europe and North America, from about the mid-1500s to the 1600s. The concept of Satanism itself actually evolved alongside these events. By the 16th century, during the Reformation, Catholics and Protestants started accusing each other of aligning with Satan. From then on, the idea of Satanists was often used to label groups seen as heretical or simply opposed to mainstream Christianity. Moving into more recent history, from the 19th century onward, certain groups began openly identifying with satanic imagery and ideals, which led to modern distinctions within Satanism. Today, you have two primary categories: theistic and atheistic Satanism. Theistic Satanists see Satan as a kind of deity, though not necessarily all-powerful, while atheistic Satanists see Satan purely as a symbol, representing human qualities like pride, defiance, and freedom. Now, while Satanism is most prevalent in the USA, the internet has helped spread these ideas globally, creating a diverse, interconnected community. In society, the figure of the devil and the idea of a dark, harmful force hidden within communities has been found across many cultures, not just Christianity. From South American traditions to Zoroastrianism in ancient Persia, cultures around the world have stories of malevolent beings or forces, whether they're called Satan or something else. So how did the word Satan itself come about? Originally, it wasn't even a name. In Hebrew, it simply meant adversary, or one who opposes. You can see examples of this in the Old Testament, where the term appears as a role rather than a proper name. Over time, however, the figure of Satan evolved in Jewish thought, and by the time of early Christianity, he was seen as an angel who had rebelled and been cast out of heaven, a storyline that made its way into texts like the Book of Enoch and later the New Testament. As Christianity grew, so did the image of Satan as the ultimate antagonist, a figure woven into folklore, art, and religious writings. By the Middle Ages, he had become the arch-villain in Christian teachings, with Satanists portrayed as a sinister mirror image of devout Christians. And that brings us to the term, Satanism. It first appeared in English in the 16th century, largely as a term of accusation, not self-identification. Catholic and Protestant groups used it to describe one another as tools of the devil. By the 19th century, it started to take on the broader sense we see today, referring to anyone who might be seen as living against Christian morals, or later, consciously venerating Satan. Now, it's essential to note that modern Satanists, especially in groups like the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple, don't typically believe in Satan as a literal being. They often see him as a metaphor, symbolizing a Promethean force, or as a symbol of human nature and the universe's raw energy, rather than a supernatural being actively seeking humanity's downfall. And now let's talk about how accusations of Satanism and devil worship evolved, and what they really meant over time. Now, there are some claims, like those of author Arthur Lyons, who suggest that satanic religions could trace their roots all the way back to ancient Persia around the 6th century BCE. The conservative journal First Things even points out that, in a way, the concept of Satanism has been around since the beginning of history, supposedly offering the age-old temptation, "Your eyes will be opened and you will be like God." But there's a twist. Religious scholars, like Joseph Laycock, argue that actual evidence suggests Satanism started not as a real religion, but as an imaginary one, crafted by early Christians to paint their opponents in a negative light. In early modern Europe, confessions of satanic worship were often forced through brutal methods like torture, leading people to admit to things they probably never did. And yet, these stories, though mostly based on propaganda and misconceptions, still influenced what would eventually be known as modern religious Satanism. Some people, believing the legends they heard, began to adopt certain practices, things like the infamous Black Mass, turning these myths into reality, a phenomenon known as ostension in folklore. During the expansion of Christianity as it moved through the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe, it encountered a whole range of other religions. Christians labeled these as pagan, and theologians argued that since there was only one true God, the gods and goddesses worshipped by pagans couldn't be real. They must be demons instead. That said, theologians didn't think pagans were knowingly worshipping devils. Rather, they saw them as misguided souls who hadn't yet discovered the true God. But when it came to groups branded as heretics by the Roman Catholic Church, the accusations shifted. They were seen as deliberate devil worshippers. In fact, these heretics were accused of every imaginable sin, from incest and cannibalism to infant murder. Ironically, similar accusations have been aimed at early Christians in the Roman Empire. This connection with pagan iconography also influenced how Satan and demons were depicted in Christian art. The devil took on the traits of classical mythological figures like the god Pan, with horns, hooves, and a wild, animalistic appearance. One of the earliest recorded accusations of devil worship within Western Christianity was in 1022, when two clerics in Toulouse were tried for allegedly venerating a demon. Over the centuries, similar accusations were leveled against heretical Christian sects like the Paulicians, Bogomils, Cathars, Waldensians, and later the Hussites. Even the Knights Templar, an influential medieval order, faced charges of worshipping a demonic figure named Baphomet. Legends claimed that Lucifer appeared at their secret meetings, sometimes in the form of a cat. The Jewish communities in Europe were also targeted with these accusations. By the 13th century, there were even reports of a mysterious group of Luciferians, led by a woman named Lucardis, who supposedly aspired to see Satan take the throne of heaven. Most historians now consider these stories likely fabrications. As Christian thought developed, so did the idea that individuals could make pacts with Satan himself. This might have stemmed from observing similar traditions in various pre-Christian beliefs, where people made pacts or covenants with gods and spirits. Another influence could have been a misinterpretation of writings by St. Augustine, who condemned augury, a form of divination, as a kind of pact with demons. By the time of the Renaissance, the idea of a diabolical pact was well established, becoming a popular theme in stories like the legend of Faust, who supposedly traded his soul to the devil in exchange for power. As we move into the early modern period, the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation caused a major split in European Christendom. Catholics and Protestants soon began accusing each other of being in league with Satan, leading to the first uses of terms like Satanist and Satanism. Then, in the 15th to 18th centuries, these fears escalated to unprecedented levels during the infamous witch trials. This period saw tens of thousands of people, mostly innocent, accused of witchcraft and executed. The accusations now focused on the idea that these so-called witches were conspiring with Satan, and educated elites created a whole mythology around this satanic conspiracy. The first witch trials began in northern Italy and France, eventually spreading across Europe and into Britain's North American colonies. Catholic and Protestant authorities alike conducted these trials. Historians today largely agree that most of those persecuted had nothing to do with any form of devil worship. However, some scholars like Geoffrey Scar and John Callow argue that a small number of individuals may have practiced harmful magic, trying to curse their enemies, which led to accusations of witchcraft. One particularly scandalous event was the affair of the poisons in 17th century France, during which several high-ranking members of the aristocracy were implicated in a web of murder, witchcraft, and satanic rituals. Between 1677 and 1682, 36 people were executed in what became known as a satanic panic. Under torture, the accused implicated one another, leading to exaggerated and largely unreliable confessions. Some accounts even mention what may be the first report of a satanic mass, with a woman used as a human altar. Then came the Enlightenment, which changed the way people saw the world. Thinkers like Isaac Newton and John Locke, along with advancements in science, started to push supernatural beliefs aside. Theories of evolution by Charles Darwin challenged traditional religious beliefs, including the concept of the devil as an active, malevolent force. Beliefs in witchcraft and demonic possession slowly faded, though belief in Satan himself remained strong in some quarters. Despite this shift, stories about Satanism didn't go away. During the 18th century, secretive clubs like the Hellfire Clubs emerged in Britain and Ireland. These groups, often aristocratic, were rumored to engage in debauchery, mock Christianity, and even toast to the devil. The Order of the Knights of St. Francis, founded by Sir Francis Dashwood, became one of the most infamous Hellfire clubs. It's likely these clubs played with satanic themes more for shock value and rebellious fun than out of any serious devotion to Satan. And as society changed, so did the accusations. The French Revolution led some Catholic authors to claim it was the work of a satanic conspiracy. Figures like Jean-Baptiste Fiyard argued that a vast network of Satanists was behind the revolution and other social upheavals, painting everyone from Jacobins to tarot card readers as part of this supposed plot. Around this time, hoaxes and exaggerated accounts of Satanism became more common. The 1890s saw the Taxiel hoax in France, where writer Léo Taxiel pretended to expose satanic practices within the Freemasons, a powerful fraternal organization. Taxiel later revealed he had fabricated these stories, but by then many believed his accounts. Similarly, British author Dennis Wheatley's novels in the early 20th century popularized the idea of satanic cults battling righteous forces. And non-fiction writers like Montague Summers claimed that satanic groups practicing black magic were active worldwide, although they lacked evidence. And now let's dive into a darker chapter in history where fear and rumor spread like wildfire. This period is known as the Satanic Panic, a time when communities were seized by a growing fear of hidden, sinister forces among them. Picture this. It's the late 20th century, and claims start surfacing about a secret society of devil worshippers who allegedly are not just practicing strange rituals but committing horrendous crimes, abuse, murder, and even cannibalism with children as victims. These tales didn't just stay in the shadows, they sparked a moral uproar, with people convinced there was a powerful network of Satanists infiltrating all levels of society, from law enforcement to politics, and hiding their crimes from the public eye. One spark that ignited this panic was a book published in 1980, Michelle Remembers. Written by Canadian psychiatrist Lawrence Posner, it chronicled the so-called repressed memories of his patient and later wife, Michelle Smith. Michelle claimed to recall horrific childhood experiences in satanic rituals, which included everything from abuse to sacrifices, with even Satan himself making an appearance. The disturbing narrative shook readers and fueled growing fears. Then, in 1983, accusations hit a preschool in California, run by the McMartin family. They were accused of sexual abuse of children under the guise of satanic rituals. This led to one of the lengthiest, costliest trials in USA history, but in the end, all charges were dropped. However, the case received massive media attention, leading to similar claims in communities across America. Soon, more and more people began to suspect that the satanic conspiracy was real and closer to home than they'd ever imagined. Those driving this satanic scare insisted on a chilling mantra: "Children don't lie," meaning any allegation a child made, no matter how surreal, was treated as fact. This claim gained traction, especially among fundamentalist and evangelical Christians who held conferences, wrote books, and made videotapes to warn of this alleged danger. The panic even found its way into law enforcement. Some officers, dubbed cult cops, held conferences to discuss satanic conspiracies, claiming to uncover hidden threats. The frenzy wasn't just limited to the USA. It crossed the Atlantic into the UK, where social workers began investigating and prosecuting alleged satanic abuses in several cases. But as the late 1980s rolled around, cracks began to show. Skepticism started growing, and some of those convicted saw their cases overturned. In 1990, FBI agent Ken Lanning, after examining over 300 cases, found no credible evidence supporting the idea of satanic ritual abuse. In Britain, a government-commissioned study revealed that, while some cases of abuse were real, they had no link to organized Satanist groups or ritual murders. There were a few isolated cases of individuals who used occult-like performances to abuse children, but these were lone offenders with no ties to a larger network. By the mid-1990s, the hysteria surrounding satanic ritual abuse had mostly faded in the USA and the UK. Yet, despite a lack of proof, a surprising portion of the public still held on to these beliefs. A 1994 survey by Redbook magazine found that a large number of people still thought that these terrifying stories had some truth to them. And now let's dive deeper into the evolution and philosophies of modern Satanism. Last time, we discussed how Anton LaVey's Church of Satan laid the groundwork for what many recognize as atheistic Satanism. LaVey created this unique path back in 1966, mixing counterculture elements, philosophical influences, and a touch of the theatrical to build a new spiritual movement focused on individualism, self-realization, and a rejection of traditional religious values. LaVey's vision for Satanism wasn't what people might typically associate with Satan worship. Instead, he portrayed Satan more as a symbol of rebellion in human nature rather than an actual deity. Through his famous Satanic Bible, LaVey promoted values like pride, ambition, and even indulgence in desires, directly countering what he saw as the restrictive nature of conventional religion. Influenced by thinkers like Nietzsche and Ayn Rand, he encouraged followers to embrace self-interest and reject altruistic ideals, favoring a sort of survival of the fittest approach to life. Now, contrasting LaVey's brand of Satanism, we have the Satanic Temple, founded decades later in 2012. Unlike LaVey's church, which often leaned towards right-wing ideas about individual empowerment, Satanic Temple is more politically active and left-leaning. Instead of focusing solely on personal freedom, they're more about challenging conservative agendas and pushing for secularism. Satanic Temple uses Satan as a metaphor for questioning authority, advocating for social justice, and protesting issues like restrictions on reproductive rights and the erosion of the separation between church and state. They're known for their provocative activism and pranks, such as the Pink Mass ritual that humorously claimed to convert the deceased mother of an anti-LGBT preacher into a lesbian, a tongue-in-cheek protest against anti-gay sentiments. As Satanic Temple following grew, they embraced more civic-minded causes, organizing events like highway cleanups and food drives to show that their principles align with community service and social consciousness, rather than any association with evil. It's fascinating how these two modern movements, LaVeyan Satanism and Satanic Temple, differ greatly in their approach, yet both use the idea of Satan as a vehicle for broader philosophical or social statements. Next, there's the Temple of Set, another offshoot of the Church of Satan, established by Michael Aquino in 1975. Unlike LaVey's atheistic view, Aquino introduced a belief in Set, an Egyptian deity of darkness, as a real supernatural figure. The Temple of Set promotes self-deification and enlightenment, which they believe are gifts from Set, allowing followers to rise above ordinary human limitations. Finally, there are more extreme groups like the Order of Nine Angles. This organization openly embraces a sinister and often violent philosophy, promoting actions that challenge social norms and boundaries in far more radical ways. They've gained attention due to associations with controversial ideologies, and their practices have stirred up significant public and political concerns, especially with links to white supremacy. So, as you can see, modern Satanism isn't a single, unified belief system. It's a broad spectrum of ideologies, each redefining Satanism to fit different visions of rebellion, individualism, and activism. In the next segment, we'll delve into even more variations within Satanism, exploring how some groups blend traditional religious elements with their beliefs.